$12,000 a year gone to grocery bills most Americans can't escape. But what if the real emergency isn't price tags? It's your reliance on a system that ran empty in a single week just a few years ago. Some families are using their own backyards to grow the equivalent of $8,000 in food and slash dependence by 60% on just 15 hours a week. Why have so few made the switch, and what's actually possible in your soil? The reality behind backyard groceries isn't what you've heard, and in a world of fragile supply chains, the stakes have never been higher. Every week, families across the country watch hundreds of dollars disappear at the checkout. For many, the annual grocery bill quietly creeps past $12,000, a sum that rivals the cost of a used car or a year's worth of rent in some towns. Yet, this is not just about sticker shock. The real vulnerability shows up when the system behind those grocery shelves falters. In the spring of 2020, entire aisles went bare in less than a week. Milk, eggs, flour, gone. Meat counters emptied, produce bins stripped down to wilted lettuce and a few bruised apples. It was not a natural disaster or a local emergency. It was a breakdown in the long, invisible chain that moves food from distant fields and factories to your kitchen table. That chain is longer than most people realize. A head of lettuce might travel 1,500 miles before it lands in your fridge. Tomatoes are picked green in California, ripened with ethylene gas and trucked across 3 states. Every banana, every bag of rice, every gallon of milk relies on a network of processors, warehouses, truckers, and retail workers. When just one link snaps, whether from a pandemic, a fuel shortage, or a labor strike, the entire system shudders. Prices double overnight. Families who once shopped by habit start rationing, watching receipts and balloon as shelves thin out. It is not just about what you pay, it is about whether you can buy it at all. During the early days of the pandemic, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked food at home prices jumping nearly 5% in a matter of months. Egg prices doubled, flour prices tripled. Staples like beans and rice vanished for weeks at a time. News reports showed lines outside supermarkets, ration limits on basics, and shoppers leaving empty-handed. For the first time in decades, millions of Americans felt the cold edge of food insecurity, not because they lacked money, but because the system itself was empty. The average household spends more on groceries each year than on electricity, gas, insurance, or even vacations. And yet, the entire supply depends on a few centralized processors and a just-in-time delivery model that leaves almost no room for error. When a single meatpacking plant closed in Iowa, pork prices spiked nationwide. When a drought hit California, the price of lettuce and berries soared everywhere from Boston to Houston. Most families accept this fragility as normal, trusting that the shelves will refill and prices will stabilize. But every disruption, whether a global crisis or a local storm, reminds us how thin the margin really is. The question is not just how much you are spending, it is what you are risking every time you rely on a system that can run dry in a week. That is the real cost hidden in every grocery receipt. A quarter-acre backyard isn't just a patch of grass. Managed with intention, it can produce up to $8,000 worth of food in a single year. That's not a fantasy from a farming magazine. It is a result confirmed by university extension studies and decades of backyard harvest logs. It is possible because modern home gardening isn't about endless rows of corn and backbreaking labor. It is about using every square foot wisely, stacking crops vertically, and keeping the soil productive from early spring through late fall. The numbers add up fast. 1,000 square feet of tomatoes, peppers, beans, and greens can yield more than a ton of produce, and when you add in fruit trees, berries, and storage crops, the grocery bill starts shrinking month by month. The real surprise is how little time it takes. Intensive backyard growers report an average of 15 hours per week during the peak season, less than a part-time job and often shared between family members. That is time spent outdoors, not hunched over a spreadsheet or stuck in traffic. The heaviest weeks are in spring, when beds are prepped and seedlings go in, and in late summer, when the harvest comes on strong. But even in those busy stretches, the work is predictable. Weed, water, harvest, repeat. By midsummer, most of the effort shifts to picking and preserving, with daily chores often finished before breakfast or after dinner. In the off-season, the workload drops to a handful of hours a week, checking storage crops, planning for next year, and maybe starting a few seeds indoors. Expert gardeners and extension agents agree the key is organization, not brute force. Drip irrigation systems and thick mulch cut watering and weeding time in half. Standard bed sizes make planting and crop rotation a breeze. Trellises, cages and row covers mean fewer pest problems and higher yields per square foot. With a solid plan, a family can grow more food in a backyard than most people think possible, with less effort than maintaining a traditional lawn. And unlike a lawn, every hour spent in the garden pays back in fresh produce, lower grocery bills, and a pantry full of homegrown food. The promise isn't perfection or self-sufficiency overnight. It is a steady shift from dependency to resilience. Measured not in theory, but in pounds of food and dollars saved. The $8,000 figure is a high bar, but it is within reach for families who treat their backyard as a food system, not just a hobby. 15 hours a week is enough to transform wasted space into a reliable source of meals, snacks, and preserves that last all year. The path is clear, the tools are simple, and the results speak for themselves. The next step is learning how to put these principles into practice, season by season, crop by crop. Tomatoes are the backbone of a backyard food system, and for good reason. One healthy plant, properly supported and fed, will give you 15 to 20 pounds of ripe fruit over the course of a season. That is not a cherry-picked number from a gardening catalogue. It is what extension studies and experienced home growers routinely log in their harvest journals. Plant 10 varieties in your beds, some early, some late, some for slicing and some for sauce, and you are looking at 200 pounds of tomatoes from April through October. That is enough for every sandwich, every salad, every pot of soup, and every batch of salsa you would normally buy, with plenty left for canning or freezing. Peppers are nearly as productive. Bell peppers, jalapenos, poblanos, and sweet Italian types all thrive in the same warm, sunny beds as tomatoes. Each plant can yield 10 to 15 pounds in a good year. Put in 8 pepper plants, and you have 100 pounds of peppers, enough to eat fresh through the summer, roast and freeze for winter, and still have extra for pickling or sharing. When you compare that to grocery store prices, where organic peppers can run $3 a pound or more, the numbers are hard to ignore. Squash and zucchini are the volume champions. 2 zucchini plants will overwhelm most families with production, often yielding 20 pounds or more per plant. 4 winter squash, think butternut, acorn, and delicata, will fill a shelf with storage crops that keep through February. These are the kinds of vegetables that turn a few square feet of soil into months of meals. Cucumbers, bush beans, and snap peas fill in the gaps, producing heavily in their short windows. Bush beans can be planted in 3 waves, each crop ready to pick in about 60 days. That means continuous fresh beans from June through September, and enough to freeze or can for the rest of the year. The key to these numbers is not magic or secret fertilizer. It is choosing crops that deliver the highest return for your time and space. Tomatoes and peppers are high-value, high-yield crops. Squash and beans are reliable bulk producers. When you fill your beds with these staples, you are not just growing a few side dishes, you are replacing the core of your summer grocery runs. Real families have tracked their results. Take the Andersons, a family of 4 in Oregon. They measured every harvest, weighed every basket, and compared their receipts. Over one season, their backyard produced just over $7,000 worth of food. Their out-of-pocket costs, seeds, compost, and a few bags of mulch came to $800. That is a net gain of more than $6,000, and their grocery bills dropped from $1,000 a month to $400 a month. They did not cut corners or eat less. They ate better, more variety, more freshness, more flavor than anything from a store shelf. These numbers are not outliers. University extension studies find that even modest gardens, when focused on high-yield crops, routinely produce hundreds of pounds and hundreds of dollars worth of food from small plots. The difference is in the planning. When you treat your backyard as a food production zone, not a hobby and not a patch of flowers, you unlock savings and abundance that most people never realize are possible. This is the foundation. High-yield, high-value crops drive the bulk of your summer grocery replacement. The next step is learning how to use every inch of space to push those numbers even higher. A backyard doesn't need to be big to be productive. The secret is multiplying your growing space without expanding your footprint. That's where vertical supports and tight succession planting come in. Instead of letting tomatoes sprawl across the ground, train them up sturdy trellises, string, cages, or wire panels. Beans and peas climb poles or netting, cucumbers run up fences. Every vertical foot you use turns wasted air into harvest. In practice, a single 20 by 40 foot plot, just 800 square feet, can match the annual output of a much larger flat garden. Intensive studies have shown that with smart, vertical growing and dense planting, home gardens routinely hit 1.2 pounds of produce per square foot. That's not just a theory, it's a benchmark, confirmed in gardens from Minnesota to Sydney. For a standard backyard, that kind of efficiency is the difference between a few baskets of summer tomatoes and a pantry full of meals. But vertical isn't the only multiplier. Succession. Planting is how you keep the soil working all season. As soon as one crop finishes, another goes in. Early spring lettuce makes way for summer beans. Beans come out and fall, carrots go in. With careful timing, you might harvest 3 or 4 crops from the same bed in a single year. That's how a modest garden plot produces like 1/8 of an acre of conventional farming. Instead of bare soil between plantings, you have a rolling wave of harvests. Lettuce in April, beans in June, squash in August, spinach in October. The garden never rests, and neither does your food supply. Trellises do more than save space. Trellising boosts airflow, cuts down on disease, and makes harvesting easier. Tomatoes ripen cleaner and faster when they're off the ground. Pole beans are simple to pick when you are standing up, not crouching in the dirt. Vertical cucumbers grow straighter and are less likely to rot. When you combine trellising with dense, staggered plantings, the numbers add up fast. That 20 by 40 foot garden, managed with these tactics, can yield 960 pounds of fresh food in a season, enough to supply a family of 4 with vegetables for months. Studies in intensive urban gardens back this up. Yields of 1.2 pounds per square foot are not just possible, they are repeatable. The real power of these strategies is that they are scalable. Whether you have a tiny lot or a generous quarter-acre, vertical supports and succession planting let you squeeze every dollar of value from your space. You do not need more land, you need more layers, and a plan to keep the beds full. It is not about working harder, it is about working smart, with systems that turn every square foot and every week of the season into a harvest. That is how families turn backyards into food systems that rival small farms, using less space, less effort, and a lot less money than most people think possible. Cold season crops are the quiet workhorses that keep backyard harvests rolling long after summer's heat fades. When temperatures drop, plants like kale, collards, carrots, and beets actually get sweeter. That's not a myth. Cold triggers a chemical shift, turning starches into sugars and making greens and roots taste better than anything shipped in from far away. Gardeners who plant in late August or early September can pull crisp spinach and tender lettuce from under a row cover well into December. In milder zones, harvests can stretch through winter with nothing more than a layer of fabric or a simple cold frame. Even in snow country, a little protection turns a dormant bed into a steady supply of fresh food when store prices are at their highest. Perennials are the long-term backbone of a backyard food system. Asparagus is a classic. Plant crowns once, and by year 3, 100 square feet will put out 20 pounds of spears every spring. No replanting is needed for 2 decades. Fruit trees are another engine for multi-year abundance. A mature apple tree, given good care, can yield anywhere from 200 to 400 pounds of fruit each year. Plant a handful of varieties, and you are looking at hundreds of pounds of apples, enough for fresh eating, sauce and storage year after year. These investments do not just fill a pantry for a season, they build a foundation for decades of harvests, turning a backyard into a source of wealth that grows with time. Preserving the harvest is the difference between a summer garden and a true backyard food system. When tomatoes and beans come in by the bucket, a pressure canner and a few sturdy shelves turn that flood into year-round meals. It is common for families to put up 50 to 80 quarts of tomatoes, sauces and pickles in just a couple weekends. That is enough to cover every pasta night, every winter stew, every craving for something bright and homegrown when the snow is falling outside. Root crops, such as potatoes, carrots, beets and turnips, store for months in a cool basement or a simple root cellar. 200 pounds of storage crops can carry a family through the leanest months, with no high-tech equipment needed. The proof is in the numbers. In Michigan, the Carsons tracked every dollar and every pound. Their backyard yielded over $7,000 in produce for an outlay of $800 on seeds, soil, and canning supplies. That is a net savings of $6,200 in one season, with grocery bills dropping from $1,000 a month to just $400 a month. The real victory was not just in the receipts. It was in the pantry lined with jars, the freezer packed with blanched greens, and the root cellar full of squash and onions. Getting started is a matter of action, not theory. Month 1, test your soil, add compost, sketch your garden, and order seeds. Month 2, plant tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, and greens, and set up trellises and irrigation. Month 3, weed, water, mulch, and plant a second round of beans and greens. By day 90, you are harvesting. By month 6, your grocery bill tells the story. The system works if you work it, one step at a time. Today, nearly 80% of Americans have access to a yard or outdoor space, but most treat it as unused turf, not potential food security. As supply chains grow less certain and grocery costs outpace wages, the backyard offers real power, control, resilience, and a way to fight back against rising prices. The next harvest could start with a single seed. What will you plant? Share your thoughts in the comments below.